Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be working on this soapstone carving kit. I got this for Christmas last year and I haven't really broken into it yet. I think I peeked inside just to see what was in there. I've never done anything like this before, so this will be a first for me and you guys get to follow along. Just opening it up to see what's inside, and first of all it comes with a pre-cut shape. This is the soapstone. This is a softer stone that is easier to kind of file away. It comes with instructions on how to do it. It comes with some sandpaper and some cloth here. It looks like a little business card, a file, and some wax. And yep, that's it. On the side, or on the back here, it says filing, sanding, waxing. So there's 3 steps. We'll see how easy this is and how this turns out. As I started working with this, I was really surprised at how soft the stone actually was, how quickly I was able to shave off bits with the file. And I also was curious about why it felt the way that it did. It kind of had this soapy, silky feel to it, which was really weird, very different from other rocks and stones that I've handled in the past. So I did a little bit of research on it and fell down into a little bit of a research rabbit hole, as one does, and learned a lot about soapstone in general and kind of why it is the way it is and how people have used it in the past. It turns out that silky, soapy feel and the fact that the stone is really soft is because it's made up mostly of talc. Yeah, that's the same stuff that's in talcum powder. So it gives it this really softness and it gives it that kind of soapy feel. Obviously it wasn't soapy as in like you couldn't lather it up or anything, but it just felt like a dry bar of soap. As I was filing away at it, you'll see that I keep dipping it into water, and that's because that's what the instructions said, but there were some times when I really filed away at it without dipping into water real often, and I ended up getting a large pile of dust, which you can actually see there, and that dust was very powdery like talc. So during my research, I did find out why it suggested that you wet the piece before working on it. And one of the main reasons was in order to prevent a lot of dust from coming off from the piece, because that dust is probably not the best thing in the world to be breathing in. When it was wet, all of the little bits that came off just clung together and was really easy to rinse off, so I didn't have a lot of dust in the air. The other reason that the research said to do that was it'll actually make it a little bit easier to carve on it, because number one, it's going to kind of lubricate the surface so that your file will slide across it a lot easier, and number two, it'll make it so that it's less likely to break off as you're working on it, which you definitely don't want, because it'd be really sad to get part of the way through and then have a part just break right off. If you're paying close attention, you can see how quickly I'm actually able to remove material with that file. Part of that is because the file is brand new and pretty sharp, but it's also because the material is actually really soft. At one point I had a little ridge that was left over and I was able to scrape it off with my thumbnail. Obviously I wouldn't have been able to carve the whole thing that way, but for like a small ridge that was left over, it was easy to scrape off with my thumbnail. But it also wasn't brittle feeling, like it wasn't going to crumble in my hands or anything like that. I was able to work with it and be pretty aggressive with the file without worrying about breaking it. But like I said, it was actually really soft as well. During my research, I did see that soapstone has been used for a very long time, like over 6,000 years in a lot of different uses. Partially because it's found like all over the world, and partially because it's actually so soft and really easy to work with. It's also non-porous, and it does a really good job of holding on to heat, so it's been used a lot in pots and pans and cookware, as well as a lot for decorative things and jewelry and things like that. I was really surprised at the color difference between when the stone was wet and when it was dry. When it was wet, it was kind of more of just a white or a light gray and maybe a tiny bit of brown in there. But when it was wet, you got a lot more variation in color. The reds were more red, the grays were more gray, the browns were more brown, and it was just a lot more pleasant to look at. When I first opened up the kit and saw that the soapstone was already in the basic shape of an elephant, I was a little bit disappointed. I was kind of hoping to be able to carve the entire thing myself, but looking back at it, I'm actually happy that it was already shaped out for me, because it would have taken me a long time with the file to get it to the shape that I wanted, and I probably would have been a lot less happy with it in the end. Not to mention, I probably would have needed different materials than just a file to shape it in the way that I really wanted it to be shaped. One thing I was really disappointed with is the fact that the legs weren't already separated for me. The only tool that it came with was that file, and that only works on the file side of it, obviously. So in order to get in between the legs, I had to use the edge of the file, and that doesn't really work very well to scrape out the material in between the legs. So what I ended up doing was I used the file a little bit to just kind of scrape at it with the very end of it, and then I ended up grabbing an X-Acto knife and used that to scrape out between the legs in order to separate them out. It was a lot of work. Probably wasn't the best thing in the world for my X-Acto knife, but it worked out fine, and now I've got a nice separation between those legs. Once everything was shaped the way I wanted it to be, the next steps was to just take a couple of different pieces of sandpaper of different grits and sand it down to just kind of get rid of some of the lines from the filing, as well as there were some lines just from when they cut the soapstone in the first place. Just get it nice and smooth, and then finish it off with a little bit of wax. I ended up having to go back and forth a little bit between the two grits of sandpaper, because I thought I had it all, and then I was looking at it and found a few spots where I had to go back to the coarser grit and then back and forth. But overall, it was really fast and easy to sand it down and get it to a nice smooth finish. The last step was to apply wax to the stone. So the instructions suggested grabbing a blow dryer and using that to heat up the stone, and then touching the wax to it and having the wax just melt directly onto the stone. I didn't have a blow dryer handy, but I did have my heat gun, so that's what I grabbed and just started heating up the stone with that. I didn't end up getting the stone hot enough to directly melt the wax, but it was warm enough that when I rubbed the wax across, some of it was left on the stone, and then I just used my heat gun over top of that, and that melted the wax on there really nicely. One reason I didn't heat up the stone anymore was because it was actually getting pretty hot and I didn't want to touch it, which is actually one of the properties of soapstone itself, is it holds onto that heat really well. After I was done getting all of the wax on there, it stayed warm for quite a while afterwards. One of the hardest places to get the wax in was underneath that trunk, because it was pretty tight in there, and the piece of wax was bigger than the area there, so I ended up just cutting the wax in half and kind of shoving it in there and rubbing it around, and that worked out pretty well. I was really happy to see that the wax really brought out the colors in the stone, because when it was dry, it was a little bit dull and boring, but when it was wet, it had that nice sharpness to the color, and with the wax on, it looked the same as it did when it was wet. So there's another project in the books. My little elephant turned out really cute. I like him. I like the colors on him. I like his little tusks and his little trunk. And I even carved a cute little tail for him. I carved in on the trunk here so that it actually sits back from where the tusks are, so that it actually is more like an elephant. Overall, I'm really happy with him, and he's going to be a really cute little decoration on my desk. In terms of soapstone carving, and would it be something that I would do again? Probably not anytime soon. I enjoyed it, but it's not something that I'm super eager to get right back at. If you're looking for some little kit or something like that that is fun to do for a couple of hours, you know, and it's not too expensive, go ahead and pick this up. I cannot tell you how much this was. I can look online and see, but I did get this as a gift, and this is the one. It was from Studio Stone Creative, and it came with everything that you needed. It came with the soapstone and the file and 2 little pieces of sandpaper and this little piece of cloth that I think was supposed to be the towel that you use to set it on and kind of carve onto. I ended up just not using this cloth at all. I suppose you probably could have used it to buff it out as well. But overall, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I hope you guys did too, and I will see you again next week. Bye.